brothers Eric and Ryan Jensen leave federal court in Denver, now facing up to 6 years in prison.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 infamous food poisoning cases in history.
Tainted spinach, contaminated cantaloupe, unpasteurized apple juice.
For this list, we'll be looking at the most notorious and dangerous cases of food contamination. We won't be mentioning any deliberate contaminations in this one. They'll have to have been a mistake. Let us know in the comments which foodstuffs you'll think twice about before eating again. Number 10. Peanut Corporation of America. The saga of one of America's worst salmonella outbreaks began in 2008, but didn't conclude legally until 2015.
This should have never happened.
In the late 2000s, it came out that peanut products processed by the Peanut Corporation of America were contaminated following decades of lax hygiene and poor sanitation, all without the knowledge of the FDA. It led to hundreds of cases of sickness all the way into the next year and 9 documented deaths.
My mother Shirley beat cancer and died from eating peanut butter.
After just months, the company filed for bankruptcy. Legal action continued for years, and in 2015, the CEO, Stuart Parnell, was given a hefty 28-year prison sentence when the courts uncovered that he knew about the contamination and continued moving product.
Prosecutors shared emails where they say Parnell pushed employees to sell tainted food, saying, "Just ship it. I cannot afford to lose another customer."
Number 9. Chinese powdered milk. Though this outbreak primarily affected China, when the news of the widespread contamination of baby formula and milk broke internationally, dozens of countries stopped imports from China to protect themselves.
In Australia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Cadbury products made in Beijing are being pulled off the shelves.
With over 200,000 incidents, including at least 50 infant deaths and thousands of hospitalizations, it was one of 2008's biggest tragedies. While Sanlu Group, the affected company, was accused of ignoring warnings, it was never quite clear who exactly was responsible or how so many products were contaminated with the chemical melamine. Countless companies were affected, and even years after the scandal, people struggled to trust baby milk in China.
For them, yeah, there are incentives for sure to try and make a bit of extra money by adding water and additives so that they can get paid more.
Number 8. U.S. Listeriosis outbreak. In 2011, 28 U.S. states were affected by a listeria outbreak, causing over 100 cases of listeriosis, a potentially fatal bacteria infection that can cause conditions like sepsis and meningitis.
This is the deadliest foodborne outbreak in more than 50 years. It may have been too great for prosecutors to ignore.
This time, it did prove fatal on at least 33 occasions. The outbreak was traced back to infected cantaloupes from Jensen Farms in Colorado. More specifically, to the fact that 2 brothers running the company business at the time were using old, dirty equipment in their farming. Shockingly, the business actually passed an inspection less than a week before.
There's no way of knowing that if we have swallowed the listeria and it's kind of smoldering around in our intestinal tracts. There's no way to know that.
There was one silver lining to this incident. It led to stricter food safety regulations in the U.S. to prevent something like this from happening again.
I don't think that they meant to do anything deliberately wrong, but they had followed some procedures that just weren't quite right.
Number 7. Bradford Sweets. The oldest food contamination incident on our list, the city of Bradford in England was ravaged by a lethal poisoning way back in 1858. It turned out that peppermint candies sold by a small market stall had somehow been mistakenly contaminated with arsenic, a notorious poison that should be nowhere near food. Hundreds were poisoned upon consumption, and 21 died. Contemporary sources suggest that people believed a contagion had struck, but police quickly traced those responsible. It all happened because sugar was so expensive at the time that candy had to be mixed with filler powder, or daft, and an assistant accidentally used the unlabeled arsenic instead. Number 6. Bilmar Foods. Another listeria outbreak on American soil happened in 1998 when 35 million pounds of deli meat and hot dogs were recalled by Bilmar's parent company, Sara Lee, voluntarily. Ultimately, the problem was a large and incredibly decrepit refrigeration unit in the hot dog packing facility. that led to bacteria growth and dripped contaminated fluids into the room. Finally, after the problem was discovered by inspectors, they had to replace the unit and recall all the meat, but not before up to 20 people lost their lives and a handful miscarried. Sarah Lee survived the Listeria outbreak, despite it being one of the worst on record at the time, though the company eventually shut in 2012.
So there's a brief period of time when that cooked product that contains no bacteria because it's been cooked thoroughly is exposed to the air. And that's the time when the Listeria can sneak in.
Number 5. German sprouts. Despite this being one of the European continent's biggest food contamination scandals, it took a while for the cause of the 2011 massive E. coli outbreak to actually be identified.
There is fear amongst the staff. There are patients the same age as our children, and nobody knows where this is coming from or where it will lead.
The cases, of which there were nearly 4,000, were localized in Germany, but appeared in neighboring European countries as well. Initially, German authorities actually blamed cucumbers from Spain, despite there being far fewer cases there. The real source was sprouts, from one farm in particular, with contaminated seeds brought from Egypt. Hundreds were hospitalized, over 50 died, and the safety of fresh vegetables in the European Union was questioned for months afterwards. Number 4. Jalisco cheese. More Listeria, this time from cheese, in what was the United States' deadliest food contamination incident at the time. This outbreak was traced to California in 1985, and just over 50 people lost their lives after consuming a specific type of soft cheese. The likely cause is that the person in charge of pasteurization, which is the vital process that destroys harmful bacteria in raw milk, wasn't properly trained. It was thought that the milk was already contaminated before being made into other products. Still, the soft cheese was found to be the cause of harm in all of the cases, and Jalisco's president was hit with a bevy of charges for violating health and safety laws. Number 3. Mad cow disease. This massive outbreak affected the UK for years, beginning in the 1980s and not ending until the following decade. When the first case was identified in 1985, mad cow disease, officially bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or BSE, was a new contagion. That's why it took so long for the scale of the problem to become known. In the end, many beef products were banned, and not only in Great Britain. Imported British beef was prohibited in the EU for years. The disease was found to cause illness in humans, leading to 178 deaths, and 4 million cows were also culled to contain the outbreak.
Because you want to tell her that you love her and that you're there for her, and you do tell her, but there's just nothing. There's no response.
Today, there are still fears of another disease outbreak in Britain. Number 2. South African Listeria Crisis. Listeria was once again found in food products in 2017, leading to a months-long crisis centered on one company in particular, Enterprise Foods, headquartered in South Africa. The reason the outbreak continued through to 2018 is because it actually took that long to trace it back to Empire Foods. In the world's worst Listeria outbreak, 216 people died, and there were more than 1,000 cases of illness. Enterprise's parent company, Tiger Brands, was hit with a class action lawsuit that same year for apparently knowing the food was contaminated and not doing anything about it. Before we unveil our top pick, here are a few dishonorable mentions. Jack in the Box E. coli. 4 died when Jack in the Box locations nationwide used E. coli contaminated beef.
We took him to the local hospital and he was seen and he was tested, and he got worse and worse and worse. They put him in our arms. I was holding out for him to take a breath. I never felt that.
The Pont Saint-Esprit poisoning. The true cause of this 1951 outbreak still isn't known, but 7 people died. Pilgrim's Pride Listeria. Tainted meat meant 7 Americans lost their lives in the Northeast. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1. Iraq grain disaster. In a horrific and entirely preventable episode of food poisoning, at least 459 people lost their lives in the early 1970s after eating contaminated grain. The grain was sent to Iraq in 1971 from Mexico and the States after being coated in a mercury-based fungicide. It was only ever intended to be used as seed to grow crops, not for consumption. But its warnings were only in English and Spanish, not Arabic. This is a rather upsetting case, given that if the grain had had warnings in the correct language, many lives could have been saved.
Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.